There are secrets that don't set you free. They lock you up for life. For the past 10 years, I've lived like a fugitive, carrying a truth so heavy that speaking it aloud could shatter this entire world, or set me free forever. I buried it under layers of memories, behind practiced smiles. But last night, when I saw that face, I knew I couldn't stay silent for one more second. Some days, memories hit me like a sudden downpour, soaking every dark corner I thought I had locked away. 10 years ago, on a gray, heavy afternoon, I lost the most precious thing in my life. Lost it in a way so cruel that even breathing felt like a burden. That person vanished from this world in an instant. A phone call, a few broken sentences, sobs cracking through the line, and then silence. Silence so deep it felt like time itself had stopped. I remember my hands trembling, the phone slipping from my grasp and hitting the floor, the sound echoing in my head like a sentence without appeal. I didn't go to the funeral. No final goodbye. Not a single tear in front of the altar. I avoided it all. The pity in people's eyes, the questions dripping with suspicion, and, most of all, the truth that if I had done things differently that day, maybe it wouldn't have ended this way. From that day on, I chose silence. I buried this story so deep that sometimes, even I could almost believe it never happened. I lived, but I wasn't really living. Just a shadow that could breathe, that knew how to smile at the right moments, that knew what meaningless words to say to fill the emptiness. Some nights, when the city is fast asleep, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to my heartbeat like a cruel reminder. You're still here, but they're not. Each morning, I put on my mask of calm, step outside as if everything is fine. And so, day after day, 10 years passed. But the truth never dies. It only waits for the right moment to surface, like a sunken ship dragging everything around it down even deeper. And I know that moment is coming. The moment I saw that face again, everything I'd spent 10 years burying rose to the surface like silt stirred from the bottom of a dark river. It wasn't the one I had lost, but someone else, carrying the same eyes, the same features, and a smile so familiar it hurt. In that single glance, I knew I couldn't go on living the way I had. That night, I opened the wooden box long forgotten at the back of my closet. Inside were yellowed photographs, a few hurriedly scribbled notes, a crumpled bus ticket, fragments of a time I hadn't dared to return to. My hands trembled as I touched them. Each object carried a piece of memory, and each memory carried a question with no answer. I began searching. At first, it was small traces, an old phone contact list, a handful of saved messages, familiar addresses from another life. Then came the sudden trips. Walking again down the street where we once stood waiting for the rain to stop. Visiting the coffee shop with the sweet scent of waffles you loved. With every step, my heart grew heavier. Because everything was still there, except you. Not every reunion was warm. Some people avoided me. Some looked at me like I was a stranger. And some couldn't hide their resentment. Every word, every glance, felt like a blade reminding me that time doesn't erase guilt. It only lets it sink deeper. So it hurts more when stirred. I kept asking myself what I was searching for. Forgiveness? An explanation? Or just another way to punish myself one more time? Whatever the answer, I knew this was no longer a journey I could stop halfway. Because once the past is awake, it won't sleep again. Not until I've walked it to the very end. I thought this journey was only about finding answers. But it's been leading me somewhere else. To a truth more raw, more gentle, and more painful than I ever imagined. It was on a late winter afternoon that I went to the old house where a mutual friend once lived. The door opened, and I saw her, his mother. She had aged, her hair now white, but her eyes were as kind as ever. I froze, unsure what to say. She simply smiled and gently invited me in. Inside the small room, everything felt frozen in time. Exactly as it had been 10 years ago. His photograph on the table. A fresh vase of yellow chrysanthemums. And that faint, familiar scent. I sat across from her. Heart pounding, bracing myself for anger. For accusations. But instead, she said, "I know you've carried a lot. And I also know, that day, not all the blame was yours." Those words cut deep into the walls I had built around myself. I had been ready for punishment. But what I received was forgiveness. Forgiveness with no conditions, no need for justification. I couldn't hold back my tears. All these years, I had been clutching my pain. Like a sentence I'd chosen to serve myself. Forgetting that I could be set free. She placed her hand over mine and said softly, "You have to live. Because he would want you to live." It was such a simple sentence. But it rang through me like a morning bell. Cutting through the thick fog in my mind. I realized then. What I needed wasn't to forget the past. But to learn how to carry it with me and still move forward. When I left that house, I felt lighter. Not because the wounds had healed. But because I knew I had just opened the first door. The door that leads out of 10 years of darkness. I came back to the city I had abandoned for a decade. The old streets were still there, only their colors had shifted with the years. The little cafe at the corner had changed owners. But the scent of morning coffee still drifted through every doorway. I walked slowly. As if I wanted to touch every paving stone. Every familiar street cry I once tried so hard to forget. On my first day, I stopped by a small gathering of old friends. Not everyone smiled when they saw me. Some looked at me for a long moment, then turned away. Some gave only a faint nod. But strangely, I didn't feel suffocated like before. I understood now. Their silence was no longer my prison. It was only the distance time had built. And I could take my time to cross it. That night, I decided to do the thing I once feared most. Tell everything. No embellishing. No evasion. I spoke about that fateful day, about my fear. About 10 years of living in silence. I wasn't seeking sympathy. I just wanted the truth to be spoken. So it would stop strangling me from the inside. Some people cried. Some left the room. And some stayed. Placing a hand on my shoulder. No one told me I was right. No one told me I was wrong. But when the story ended, I felt a strange peace. As if the crushing weight on my chest had finally been set down. Coming back wasn't just returning to a place. It was returning to myself. Facing the things I had once refused to see. I realized the city hadn't really changed much. It was me who had changed. And this time, I was no longer running. The next morning, as I stepped out into the street, I looked up at the sky. Not to search for a sign, but to remind myself that from this moment on, every breath would be a new beginning. In the days that followed, life didn't suddenly become lighter the way I had once hoped. The sadness was still there, sometimes rushing in without warning, like a cold dawn wind. But unlike before, I no longer ran from it. I learned to sit still and let it pass like a rain shower. Knowing that beyond the gray clouds, there was still light. I began doing the things I had neglected for 10 years. Each morning, I tended to the pot of chrysanthemums on my balcony. The kind you once loved. I called old friends, not to speak of the past, but to ask how they were doing now. I returned to the work I had once loved. For the first time feeling truly present here, in this moment. Sometimes, walking past the street where we once stood waiting for the rain to stop, I still slowed my pace. Not to dwell on loss anymore, but to smile at the memory. A memory that no longer bound me. Only quietly reminding me that I had once loved. Once lost, and once survived. I understood then that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means continuing forward with the scar, without letting that scar define all of who you are. To forgive myself, as she had said, was the greatest gift I could give, both to me and to the one who was gone. One morning, I happened to hear an old song. 10 years ago, its melody would have made me cry. Today, I stood by the window, listened to it all the way through, and smiled. Not because the pain had vanished, but because I knew I was strong enough to live with it. And so, I keep walking. Not to leave anything behind, but to carry it all with me as part of who I am. Every new day, whether ordinary or quiet, is proof that I have chosen to live. And this time, I'm truly living. I know there will always be days when old memories come knocking. There will be moments when just a scent or a fleeting glance can make my heart sink. But unlike 10 years ago, I'm no longer afraid to open the door and let them in. Because I've learned pain is not the enemy. It is a witness to what we once loved, once lost, and once dared to live for. Running from it only makes it follow you forever. Facing it is the only way to step out of the loop. If you are carrying a secret, a wound, or a fear you believe you must hide forever, know this: you are not alone. One day, you will find the courage to speak it aloud. And when you do, you'll see that the past doesn't disappear, but it no longer has the power to control you. It took me 10 years to find my way back to myself. You don't have to take that long.